Hello, and welcome to another episode of ASCAP Screen Time. I'm Amanda Schaffner from the Film and Television team. Today, we're thrilled to get a little screen time with the maestra herself, Wendy Blackstone. Wendy is an award-winning composer, having scored over 130 films and television series. 9 of those projects have won or been nominated for an Academy Award. She's joined by her longtime friend and colleague, the esteemed filmmaker, Joe Berlinger. Joe is an Academy Award and 8-time Emmy nominated and Peabody and Emmy winning filmmaker whose films not only impact audiences, but legitimately change our culture. Of course, you'll know Joe's films like Brother's Keeper, the Paradise Lost trilogy, which helped lead to the recent release of the wrongfully convicted West Memphis 3, and the genre-defining rockumentary Metallica, Some Kind of Monster. Together and through their individual careers, Joe and Wendy have helped define the documentary genre as a space where artful cinematography, stirring musical soundtrack, and dramatic storytelling have a home just as much as narrative feature. You can certainly thank them for the long-standing American obsession with true crime documentary. Their most recent collaboration is the Netflix sensation Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. This project centers on the disappearance of 21-year-old Canadian student Elisa Lam, a case that captured the attention of the country in the winter of 2013. Crime Scene is an incredible testament to the talent of both Joe and Wendy, and we can't wait to hear more from them. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Joe and Wendy. Let's start this conversation off with a question. What first drew each of you to the documentary genre, and why has it kept you interested all these decades later?
Well, first of all, thank you, Amanda. This is great to be doing this, and any excuse to spend time with my good buddy, Wendy, is always welcome. When I was a teenager, I was exposed to Holocaust liberation footage from concentration camps, and I just became obsessed with it. It didn't make me want to be a filmmaker. I was just obsessed with the idea that even though I'm German and Jewish, we weren't very Jewish at home, and we weren't very German at home because relatives, my great-great-great-grandfather came over from Germany in the 1850s. So, and we weren't practicing Jews, but I was just obsessed with this idea that if I was German and Jewish and grew up during that period, I would have been killed. So that obsession with the Holocaust, led me to study German. So I was a German major in college, and that obsession led me to want to work and live in Germany and somehow figure out how to, get paid to speak languages. Like film wasn't even on the radar. And so I sort of bluffed my way into a job at the Frankfurt office of Ogilvy and Mather, which is a big advertising agency, and was kind of a junior producer working overseas. And the first time I was ever on any kind of a film set was a Nescafe TV commercial in Frankfurt, Germany. And that's when the light bulb went off that, oh, camera, film, gee, I like this. And I had to figure out a way to get into the film business. Eventually I went back to New York. Ogilvy sent me back to New York, where I was then a junior producer on American Express commercials, trying to figure out how to get into the film business. We hired the Maisel brothers, the seminal documentarians. This would be 1985 now, I guess, showing how old I am. I was 12 at the time. No, I'm just kidding. We hired the Maisel brothers to shoot some real people commercials, which was new at the time, shooting an unscripted documentary style commercial. And we hired these seminal documentarians to do it. I hit it off with the Maisel brothers. They were looking to get more commercial work. I was looking to get into the film business. And so I started working for them and kind of used it as my film school while I got them more commercial work, which to me is very ironic that I've become one of the noted documentarians of my generation, because had I hit it off with Ridley Scott on this commercial and he liked me, I could have just as easily gone in that direction in big budget Hollywood movies. But now that I've done documentaries for so long, I realize it was meant to be, because I can't imagine having had any other career than the one I've had, which Wendy has been a big part of.
That's why I love doing this, Joe, because I get to learn even more about you after these decades of friendship and creative collaboration. I have to say my trajectory that brought me here ends up at that point where you work with the Maisels, because that's where I first met you. I was working on a film with Susan Fromke, and we met at the office, and you were doing your first film, Outrageous Taxi Stories. And thank goodness you hired me, because I still love that score.
Yeah.
More importantly, I got to meet you and Bruce and work with you forever. My trajectory comes from growing up in the Bronx and going to public schools and always being the first chair in the violin, in the orchestra, picking up other instruments along the way, buying my own piano, guitar, flutes, anything I could get my hands on. Starting composing before I knew what it was called at age 12, and drawing my dreams. So for me, also marching for human rights from age 13, 14, when I discovered that there was an art form that could combine all my loves of music, composing, ideas, and visuals, because I was a film freak, always going down to the theaters to see the masterful projects and learn from the greats. When I found this union of my favorite things, I was in heaven and never let it go. It was an extraordinary moment, because this all came together, I would say, was when I was at the conservatory at Brooklyn College. And I also studied electronic avant-garde music there, and composition of all sorts. I was playing in Latin bands. I was studying jazz with Dizzy Gillespie and Barry Harris. Being a part of New York fed who I would be musically, the eclectic. I speak 4 languages. But it was one night when I went to an event, I was asked to help a young director score his film. And I had to figure out what it was on my own, because there weren't any film scoring classes at that point. But once I dove in, if you are passionate about anything, you will succeed. You will find a way to accomplish what you need to do. And being one of those types, I just embraced it wholeheartedly. And there I was. In my bliss forever. It's been so long since I started, so young, but this is my life. Very happy to be here, and to be here with you, Joe, excites me to no end. You have been an incredible highlight in my life, all our projects together, but we'll talk about that. I guess we get to talk to each other now organically about our process.
Well, it's actually interesting, because we met at Maisels, because I was doing freelance publicity on the side. The Maisels didn't know that, but I was kind of doing some freelance publicity on the side as a publicist. I was trying to figure out my way when I was at Maisels. Am I going to be a filmmaker? Am I going to be in the, more of a producing side? But you were doing Ludge Ghetto. That's how we actually met. Remember, weren't you doing a film about? Yeah. So I was the publicist. That's how we actually met. I met you when you were doing Ludge Ghetto, because I was doing the freelance publicity for that guy Steven something.
Samuelson.
Yeah. Anyway, that's really how we met. But that's one point, which is interesting, because that's Holocaust related, which was my obsession. That kind of eventually is the reason I got into film. And then the other, I think contextually, I think it'd be interesting for people to know, music composition for documentaries has become, not only commonplace, but expected. When we started, it was very controversial to score a documentary. The then vanguard of documentarians back then, the people in the 80s, had this issue that scoring and adding music is emotionally manipulative and therefore not journalistic. And so we were coming at a time where the definition of what is a documentary was greatly expanding. You had Errol Morris, who did Thin Blue Line, which was expanding the definition of what a documentary could be by the use of recreations. Michael Moore was expanding the definition of what a documentary could be by putting himself on camera and being kind of this on camera and social justice ombudsman. you know, in the late 80s, early 90s was actually a very exciting period for documentary where, you know, the definition of what is a documentary was expanding, and we were borrowing from the tools of the narrative filmmaker in terms of compelling opening title sequences and a certain narrative editorial style and a cinematography style, but also a big bucket was music. The use of music to such a degree that we were using it starting in that era really was kind of a game changer in how composition for documentaries was approached, you know?
That's amazing. And I am so thrilled to relearn that we met on that incredibly important project for me as well, Lodge Ghetto. It was my first score after scoring so many films already that touched upon the Holocaust experience. And I too had family that had been over there. So to be able to finally express myself musically on a documentary that spoke directly to that was very, very huge. I went into that for 6 months, and it took me a long time to come out of there because I think I went there seriously. And you're speaking to the fact that scores, original music, was a new element and controversial is very interesting because I was very experimental on that score. I felt I had to, and this was early on, be sampling sounds as metaphors and reshaping them, something you and I have done subsequently. And so it was quite avant-garde, kind of stating in a very strong way who I would become musically in my scores. And for me, the blend of giving heart, and of course I have to touch my heart without even thinking, giving my heart and soul to themes, as well as trying a way to be innovative, was very clear in that score. And it was pivotal in me defining who I was artistically.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy that we met upon that, you know. And you could see how that trajectory musically was in our fabulous project, Outrageous Taxi Stories,
Yeah.
where, you know, I put a microphone out my 10th Street apartment to capture the sounds of the taxis that became somehow manipulated to sound like weird saxophones, and then the beat of the city and the clicks and this, you know, getting that energy going to because you inspired me. I mean, one thing, if I say anything today, is about if you can find a relationship between director and composer where you connect on heart and mind, and know how to communicate, you are going to make great collaborations.
Yeah, it's hard to even, you know, break down how we collaborate, but it's just been a really beautiful thing over the decades because you are a deeply feeling person. I think I'm a deeply feeling person, despite the gruff exterior. You know, we find, I think that's how we start, is we talk about what are we trying to get out of the film? What are the themes? What are the social justice themes, if that's related? I mean, most of my stuff is social justice. You know, what are we trying to say in the film, and then how to express that musically? And that combination of organic and experimental sound, along with defining specific themes, you know, really has been. And you know, you're great about, you ask me a million questions and draw stuff out of me to describe things. You know, I don't come to you and say, I want this, 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 and this. It's much more of a evocative kind of conversation where we land at a place, you know, which has been really nice. A lot of composers kind of get locked into certain ideas, and we seem to have a vibe where we are able to land on something, you know, out of deep analysis of what it is the story is trying to say, which I've always enjoyed. You know, even with, I mean, the most recent project, you know, with Crime Scene, it was very, you know, for me, the whole series is kind of a meditation on true crime obsession, and true crime has exploded, and I am sometimes labeled a true crime pioneer. And I like the pioneer part, but the true crime thing makes me a little wince a little bit because I think of myself more as a social justice filmmaker who spends a lot of time in the crime space, a lot on wrongful conviction and other problems in the criminal justice system. True crime suggests, that phrase suggests that we're wallowing in the misery of other people's tragedy for entertainment purposes, and there's no larger social justice message. And so it was very important on Crime Scene that we brought the victim, Elisa Lam, to life as best we could, and to give her some humanism, because every other telling of that story, because the Cecil Hotel is, I'm not the first person to tell that story, but usually people default to the easy and incorrect temptation of telling it like it's some ghost story, and that this place is legitimately haunted. And my whole show kind of broke that apart and brought Elisa Lam to life, because I felt like dismissing her tragedy as demonic possession or some haunted house story is incredibly disrespectful to the victim. It was a tragic accident, and the location, it was not a haunted location, and that caused her death. And so we talked a lot about those issues, and bringing her to life and giving her a theme and making people like really respond to her as a three-dimensional human being was an essential element to the score. I don't know why I went down that road, but I did.
No, it's a wonderful road. But speaking to the first part of that, our conversations for me are fundamental, and that's why sometimes I'll take a day or two to pick your brain, to go inside your heart and mind, so that I can translate that somehow in the best possible way to bridge the film to the audience, to bring them into where you want to go, and in my way. And then you're going to give me notes or not, but it's, if I didn't have you, I was thinking about it instead of sleeping last night. I said, if I didn't have you inside me, my mind and heart, when I was scoring these, I would write a completely different score for these projects. And it's my responsibility in my mind to understand completely where you're coming from so that I can do that musically. And, music is an invisible art. It's like, it's such a delicate thing. It's like air. So the detail that one must have, at least this creative person, is everything, so that I mix the right paint, the right color, the right sound, the right mood. And so your ability to communicate for me has been fundamental, and it's why I love so much our initial creative conversations. They blow my mind. I love going into that place with you, and then I go to work and we continue with our process. I love your humanity, and I think that's the other reason why I can do my best work with you, is that when you bring not only Elisa Lam's story alive and over the fabulous 4 episodes, because that's what I love about episodic, is we got bigger murals to paint on. Usually we have an hour, maybe we have 90 minutes. We had 4 hours to be able to develop a story, which was incredibly fun and amazing for me artistically. The fact that you tied that in with the greater community and the homelessness that exists around LA, the responsibility or the lack thereof of people around to notice the other person in need, all the things that were highlighted in this series from such a human place, was incredible. And that seed, that huge core, was for me the whole impetus to respond. If we took those elements, that humanity, out of the equation, I would be much less interested. And I don't know if I could do the same quality of work. And I'm being incredibly honest here. Maybe I'm BSing myself, but
No, and our conversations are great, and they inspire me to think more deeply about those issues too. And it's like it's a 3-legged stool. It's the heart and the mind that we always talk about. But what you've been so great at, and if you listen to every score of every film, they're very different. And the third element for me is locating a sense of place. So just like Lodge Ghetto, way back when, you knew where you were. Taxi Stories, all those sounds you recorded, we knew where we were and what time period. Crude, one of my favorite scores that you've ever done, that has that, you know, Ecuadorian twang to it, you know, that South American vibe. And contrast that with the film we did right after, a year later, was Paradise Lost 3 with the heavy metal, you know, which is a nod to Metallica. So because Metallica was such an essential part of that story. For people who don't know, Metallica lyrics were introduced into trial as evidence that the West Memphis Three were killers. And so electric guitar, which is a favorite of mine in all of our scores, you know, it became quite prominent in that. So you've been, you know, I think you've been great at, like, you know, really each score feels different and really locates us in a time and place.
Thank you. And that speaks to long-term collaborations, which I know people want to hear about. I think the beauty of that for people like us is that we keep on building upon a foundation. And because we're creative and always evolving and looking for the next, in my case, audio revolution, I'm a revolutionary there too. I want to try and come up with new things all the time to titillate people to open their minds and hearts to new ways of thinking through just strange sounds, subtly, not turning them off, but, you know, that right balance. And long-term relationships, collaborations, like Fassbinder would always use his same one, Leone and Morricone, you know, all these people that spend their lives working together allows you to keep building upon that. You know, I feel a trust from you that gives me a sense of freedom immediately to do my best. I'm not thinking about, oh, what is he going to think? Of course, the first time I wrote the first theme for Crime Scene, I was like, oh my God, what is he going to think? You know, after like, what, 6 weeks of making myself crazy. But isn't that exciting? We are eternally youthful in creativity because you never change your approach to creating, in that you have to explode and do something new each time. If not, what are you doing this for?
Well, thank you both so much for spending a little screen time with us here at ASCAP Screen Time. We're so thankful that both of you were able to come on and talk about your filmmaking journey together and your beautiful friendship. So thank you both for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone else on the next episode of ASCAP Screen Time.
Cool. Thank you for having us. This was fun.